The medical bay of the Stellar Mercy gleamed under soft blue lights as Dr. Aria Winters reviewed her latest patient's charts. Her small medical vessel, though modest compared to the massive hospital ships of the Galactic Alliance, had gained a reputation for handling the most perplexing cases across known space. Aria's methodology, combining cutting-edge human medical science with an intuitive understanding of alien physiologies, had earned her both acclaim and criticism in equal measure. The gentle hum of the ship's systems was interrupted by an urgent beep from the communication console. Aria looked up, her dark eyes narrowing at the unusual encryption patterns scrolling across the screen. The signal originated from the Celestial Empire, a notoriously isolationist civilization known for their advanced biotechnology and rigid social hierarchy. "Computer, decrypt and play," Aria commanded, her fingers unconsciously reaching for the pendant she always wore, a piece of meteorite that had crashed near her childhood home. The very thing that had first sparked her interest in the stars. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a message that appeared to have been sent through multiple relay points to mask its origin. The voice that emerged was soft but clear, carrying an undercurrent of desperation that Aria had learned to recognize in her years of practice. "This is Princess Nyara of the Celestial Empire. I seek the assistance of Dr. Aria Winters. The royal healers cannot help me, and I fear I am running out of time. Please, if you receive this message, I need your help." Aria leaned back in her chair, her mind already racing through the implications. The Celestial Empire rarely sought outside help, considering it beneath their dignity. For a princess to reach out personally, bypassing all diplomatic channels, suggested a situation far more dire than the measured tone of the message implied. The computer chimed again, displaying the limited medical data attached to the transmission. Aria's eyes widened as she processed the information. The princess's symptoms were unlike anything she had encountered before. Cellular degradation patterns that defied normal biological processes, nervous system anomalies that seemed to follow no logical progression, and energy readings that fluctuated in impossible ways. "Computer, plot a course to the Celestial Empire's capital world," Aria ordered, already moving to prepare her equipment. She knew the risks. The Empire was known for its labyrinthine politics and mysterious disappearances of those who violated their protocols. But throughout her career, Aria had lived by one rule: never ignore a call for help, no matter the danger. As the Stellar Mercy's engines hummed to life, Aria began reviewing everything she knew about celestial physiology. The Empire's people were humanoid, but their biology incorporated crystalline structures that channeled energy in ways that human science was only beginning to understand. Their healing practices were a closely guarded secret, combining technology with rituals that dated back millennia. The journey to the Empire's capital took 3 days, during which Aria received no further communications from the princess. The silence was concerning, but not unexpected. Whatever had driven Mayoret to seek outside help would likely prevent her from maintaining regular contact. The capital planet, Crystallis Prime, came into view like a jewel against the darkness of space. Its cities were built from living crystal, growing and shifting in patterns that reflected the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. The sight was breathtaking, but Aria noticed something odd. Areas of darkness in the crystalline networks, as if parts of the great consciousness were being deliberately hidden. Landing clearance came with surprising speed, though the coordinates directed her to a secluded docking bay far from the main spaceport. As Aria guided her ship down, she spotted figures waiting below. Palace guards, their armor incorporating the same crystal technology that powered their civilization. Aria gathered her medical kit, including several pieces of equipment she had modified specifically for dealing with unknown conditions. Years of experience had taught her to be prepared for anything, especially when dealing with civilizations as advanced and secretive as the Celestial Empire. As she descended the ship's ramp, the guards approached. Their crystalline armor pulsed with subtle patterns of light, a sign of active scanning technology. "Dr. Winters," the lead guard spoke, his tone formal but tight with underlying tension. "You will follow us. Make no attempts to communicate with anyone outside the palace. The princess awaits. I'll help create a new story with a similar theme, but different characters and plot. Let me first outline the 5 parts, then write part 1. Now let me write part 1 of the story. I've created the story outline and written part 1, introducing our main characters and setting up the central conflict. Would you like me to continue with part 2? The story features completely new characters, Dr. Aria Winters and Princess Nyara, and a unique setting, the Celestial Empire, while maintaining the themes of human ingenuity and determination in helping others. The next few days in the Crystal Palace revealed a pattern that made Dr. Aria Winters' blood run cold. As she reviewed her scans of Princess Nyara, the evidence became impossible to ignore. The princess wasn't suffering from a natural illness. She was being systematically poisoned. The poison was ingenious in its complexity, designed to mimic the natural deterioration of the Celestial's crystalline biology. It was introduced gradually, probably over years, making it nearly impossible to detect without the kind of outside perspective that Aria's human medical training provided. But what truly disturbed her was how the poison seemed tailored specifically to Nyara's unique genetic structure. "Your Highness," Aria said carefully, looking up from her holographic displays, "what I'm about to tell you may be difficult to hear." She paused, studying the princess's reaction. Nyara sat in her crystal-formed chair, her once brilliant skin now clouded like frosted glass in several places. "Speak freely, Dr. Winters," Nyara replied, her voice steadied despite her weakened state. "I didn't summon you across the stars to hear comfortable lies." Aria nodded, bringing up a detailed molecular scan. "You're being poisoned. The deterioration in your crystalline matrix isn't natural. It's being caused by a highly sophisticated compound that's been introduced into your system over a long period." Nyara's expression didn't change, but the crystals in the walls pulsed briefly with a deep blue light, a reflection of her emotional state that she couldn't quite suppress. "I suspected as much," she said quietly, "though I didn't want to believe my own people capable of such." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the royal healers. They swept into the room in their traditional robes, crystal staffs humming with energy. Leading them was High Healer Vorax, his ancient face set in lines of disapproval. "This is unacceptable," he announced, his voice resonating with authority. "Your Highness, allowing an outsider to examine you violates our most sacred traditions. The healing arts of the Celestial Empire are not to be corrupted by primitive human methods." Aria stood her ground, meeting Vorax's gaze steadily. "With all due respect, High Healer, your sacred traditions haven't been able to identify what's killing your princess. Perhaps it's time to consider that different perspectives might have value." The crystals in Vorax's staff pulsed angry red. "You dare question thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. Our healing arts were ancient when your species was still huddling in caves." "And yet," Aria countered, pulling up her diagnostic displays, "you haven't noticed that someone is deliberately poisoning a member of your royal family. Either you're not as observant as you claim, or—" She let the implication hang in the air. The tension in the room could have shattered crystal. Nyara's voice cut through it like a laser. "Show them, Dr. Winters. Show them what you found." Aria projected her findings, the complex molecular structures rotating in the air between them. "The poison is designed to break down the crystalline matrices that are fundamental to celestial biology. It's being introduced through the traditional healing treatments themselves, probably through the energy transfer crystals used in royal ceremonies." The younger healers murmured among themselves, but Vorax's face had turned to stone. "This is absurd. These accusations are an insult to our entire civilization." "Then prove me wrong," Aria challenged. "Test the ceremonial crystals. Unless you have something to hide." Before Vorax could respond, Nyara's voice rang out with unexpected strength. "The crystals will be tested. All of them. And Dr. Winters will oversee the testing." The next hours were a flurry of activity as Arya set up her testing protocols. She worked efficiently, combining her advanced scanning technology with her understanding of celestial crystal dynamics. Some of the younger healers, fascinated by her methods, began to assist, their initial skepticism giving way to curiosity. What they discovered was worse than Arya had feared. The poison wasn't just in a few ceremonial crystals. It had been systematically introduced throughout the entire royal healing system. Someone with intimate knowledge of both celestial healing practices and modern biochemistry had engineered a long-term assassination attempt disguised as medical treatment. The question isn't just who. Arya explained to Nara later that night, as they reviewed the evidence in the princess's chambers. It's why. This level of sophistication, the specific targeting of your genetic code, this isn't just about killing you. Someone wants to make it look like your own biology is failing. Nyara's expression was thoughtful as she absorbed this information. In our culture, genetic deterioration is seen as a sign of unworthiness to rule. If my condition had progressed as planned, it would have been taken as proof that I'm unfit for the throne. You're next in line. I am now. Nyara's crystal-faceted eyes met Arya's. After my older brother's tragic accident 2 years ago, Arya felt a chill run down her spine. An accident, a malfunction in his personal transport's crystal drive. No one questioned it at the time. Nyara's voice was bitter, just as no one was meant to question my illness. As they talked late into the night, Arya began implementing her treatment plan. It was risky, combining human medical techniques with modified versions of celestial healing practices, but they had no choice. The poison had progressed too far for conventional treatments alone. This will be painful, Arya warned as she set up the first treatment. I have to purge the poison while simultaneously stabilizing your crystalline matrix. We're basically going to rebuild your biological systems from the ground up. Nyara smiled faintly. Pain I can handle, Doctor. It's betrayal that hurts more. As Arya initiated the treatment, watching the interaction between human medicine and celestial biology, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Somewhere in this beautiful but deadly palace, someone was watching, planning, waiting to strike again. And this time, they might not be content with slow-acting poison. The first attempt on Dr. Arya Winter's life came 3 days after she began Princess Nyara's treatment. It was subtle, a microscopic alteration in her ship's air filtration system that would have slowly suffocated her in her sleep. Fortunately, the Stellar Mercy's security protocols detected the tampering before any harm was done. The second attempt was less subtle. One of her medical devices exploded during a calibration check, sending crystalline shards flying across her laboratory. Only her quick reflexes and the emergency force field saved her from serious injury. They're getting desperate, Arya observed, studying the remains of the sabotaged equipment. She stood in Nyara's chambers, where the princess was showing visible signs of improvement after a week of treatment. The clouding in her crystalline skin had begun to clear, though the process was agonizingly slow. The council meets in 3 days, Nyara explained, her voice stronger than it had been in months. According to our laws, if I'm not deemed fit to rule by then, the succession passes to my cousin, Regent Phylax. She paused, her expression darkening, who has been extraordinarily helpful in managing royal affairs during my illness. Arya's mind raced, connecting pieces of the puzzle. Phylax. He's the one who first suggested the traditional healing ceremonies for you, isn't he? Yes. He claimed they would help me cope with my brother's death. Nyara's laugh was bitter. How convenient that the treatments meant to heal me were slowly killing me instead. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime, one of Arya's security alerts. She pulled up a holographic display, showing the palace's crystal matrix energy patterns. Someone's trying to access the medical database. They're good, but not good enough to hide their traces completely. Nyara leaned forward, studying the display. That's coming from the sacred archives. Only members of the royal family and the high healers have access to that section. Then I think it's time we did some investigating of our own. Aria pulled out a small device from her medical kit. This is something I developed for emergency surgeries. It can temporarily mask life signs. If we time this right, we can make them think their poison is finally working. The plan was dangerous, but they had run out of options. That night, as the twin moons of Crystallis Prime cast their pale light through the palace windows, they put their scheme into action. Aria administered a carefully calculated dose that would mimic the poison's final stages, while actually protecting Nyara's recovering systems. The response was immediate. Within hours, High Healer Vorax arrived with a full contingent of healers and guards, along with Regent Thalax himself. Thalax was tall and imposing, his crystalline features sharp and perfect, a stark contrast to Nyara's weakened state. "My dear cousin," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "the High Healer informs me your condition has worsened significantly. Perhaps it's time to accept that the burden of rule should pass to more capable hands." From her position by the medical equipment, Aria watched the scene unfold. Her scanners were running at full capacity, recording every interaction, every energy signature in the room. What she saw confirmed their worst suspicions. Thalax's crystalline matrix showed traces of the same compound used to poison Nyara. He was the source. But there was something else, something that made Aria's blood run cold. The energy patterns in Thalax's crystals weren't natural celestial formations. They had been artificially enhanced, suggesting modification at a genetic level. Someone had been experimenting with celestial biology, pushing it beyond its natural limits. "I've reviewed the latest scans," Vorax announced, his ancient face grave. "The deterioration has reached critical levels. According to our laws, Princess Nyara must be declared unfit for succession. How fortunate that you're here to witness this, cousin," Nyara said quietly. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were sharp as she watched Thalax's reaction. "Just as you were there when my brother's transport malfunctioned." A flicker of unease crossed Thalax's perfect features. "Your illness makes you speak nonsense, cousin. Grief has clearly clouded your mind." "Has it?" Aria stepped forward, her diagnostic displays active. "Or perhaps she's finally seeing clearly for the first time in years. Would you like to explain why your crystalline matrix shows traces of the same compound that's been poisoning her?" The room erupted into chaos. Guards moved to intercept Aria, but stopped short as Nyara suddenly sat up, her skin beginning to glow with renewed strength. The antidote had worked perfectly, neutralizing the poison's effects, while maintaining the appearance of weakness until the right moment. "Impossible," Vorax whispered, his face ashen. "The treatment should have killed her," Aria finished, "just like it killed her brother. The evidence is quite clear, High Healer. You and Regent Thalax engineered this whole thing, didn't you? The question is why? What were you really trying to achieve?" Thalax's composed facade cracked, revealing something dark and obsessive beneath. "You understand nothing. The Celestial Empire has grown weak, clinging to outdated traditions, while other races surpass us. My experiments were meant to strengthen us, to evolve our species to its next stage of development. By experimenting on your own family," Nyara's voice was steel, "by murdering your own kind. Sacrifices were necessary," Thalax snarled. "The old bloodline is stagnant. My enhanced genetics are the future of our people. Once I take the throne, I can implement the changes needed to ensure our survival." But as he spoke, the crystals in the walls began to pulse with an intense light. Nyara stood, her restored strength evident in every movement. "You forgot something, cousin. The palace itself is alive. It's connected to the true royal bloodline, and it doesn't recognize your artificially enhanced genetics as legitimate." The crystal walls flared blindingly bright, responding to Nyara's command. Guards who had been loyal to Thalax found themselves immobilized by crystalline growths, while others moved to arrest him and Vorax. As the conspirators were led away, Aria noticed something troubling in her final scans. Thalax's genetic modifications were unstable, showing signs of cascading failure. Whatever he had done to himself in his quest for power was beginning to unravel. And somehow, she suspected that this crisis was far from over. Dr. Aria Winters stood in her makeshift laboratory aboard the Stellar Mercy, studying the results of her latest analysis with growing concern. The genetic samples taken from Regent Thalax revealed something far more terrifying than individual ambition. They showed signs of systematic experimentation on a massive scale. How many? Princess Naira asked quietly. She stood by the viewport, her crystalline form now fully restored but bearing invisible scars from her ordeal. At least 300 distinct genetic signatures, Aria replied, projecting a holographic display of interlinked DNA structures. Your cousin wasn't working alone. This is decades of research, systematic modification of celestial genetics. They were building an army. The implications were staggering. Thalax and his conspirators hadn't just been planning a coup. They had been orchestrating the evolution of their entire species without consent or oversight. The modified genetics they developed could rewrite the fundamental nature of celestial biology. The question is where? Naira mused, her eyes tracking patterns in the data. This level of experimentation would require facilities, resources. She paused, realization dawning. The deep crystals, the forbidden zones beneath the palace. Before Aria could respond, the ship's sensors blared a warning. Energy signatures were spiking throughout the crystal city, following patterns she'd never seen before. The palace walls themselves seemed to pulse with an ominous light. They're activating, Aria breathed, watching the readings climb. All the modified subjects, they're being triggered simultaneously. Security feeds from across the city showed chaos erupting. Celestials with enhanced crystalline structures were emerging from hidden chambers, their bodies transformed by Thalax's experiments. Some had grown crystalline weapons from their own flesh, while others seemed to be able to manipulate the city's crystal matrix directly. We need to get to the deep crystals, Naira declared, already moving towards the ship's exit. If we can shut down the control center, we might be able to stop this before it spreads. The journey through the disintegrating city was a nightmare. Enhanced celestials rampaged through the streets, their modified bodies allowing them to reshape the crystal architecture at will. Loyal palace guards fought desperately to protect civilians, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer power of their transformed opponents. Aria and Naira made their way through secret passages, guided by the princess's intimate knowledge of the palace. As they descended deeper beneath the surface, the air grew thick with crystalline dust, and the walls thrummed with raw energy. There, Naira pointed to a massive door covered in ancient symbols. The entrance to the deep crystals. No one has been allowed down here for generations. Now they knew why. As they forced their way inside, they found a vast laboratory complex carved into the living crystal of the planet itself. Rows upon rows of stasis chambers lined the walls, many still occupied by partially transformed celestials. This is wrong, Naira whispered, horror evident in her voice. These are my people. They were supposed to be in medical stasis, waiting for treatments for various conditions. Instead, they were being used as test subjects. At the center of the complex stood a massive crystal matrix, the control center for the entire operation, and before it stood Thalax, his body now grotesquely transformed by his own experiments. Crystalline growths had consumed most of his original form, turning him into something that was neither fully celestial nor purely crystal. "Welcome, cousin," he said, his voice resonating through the crystal chambers. "Have you come to witness the evolution of our species?" "This isn't evolution," Naira responded, her voice steadied despite her horror. "This is perversion. You've destroyed everything our people stand for. I've made them stronger." Thalax roared. "Look at what we can become." He gestured, and the crystals around him responded, growing and shifting at his command. No more weakness, no more bowing to the limitations of flesh. We can become living gods. At what cost? Arya stepped forward, her medical scanners active. Your modifications are unstable. The transformed subjects are burning out. Their bodies can't handle the strain of the changes you forced on them. A necessary sacrifice for progress. Thalax dismissed. Those who survive will be stronger for it. Survival isn't enough, Arya argued, moving slowly closer to the control matrix. You're not just killing their bodies, you're destroying what makes them who they are. Their consciousness, their free will, everything that makes them individuals. As they spoke, Arya's scanners were mapping the control system, looking for vulnerabilities. The entire network was powered by a central crystal core, the same technology that had been used to poison Mayara, but on a massive scale. Thalax must have sensed what she was planning. With frightening speed, he launched crystalline spears at both Arya and Nyara. They barely dodged in time, taking cover behind research equipment. You can't stop this, he gloated. The transformation has already begun. Soon, every celestial in the Empire will evolve or die trying. But he had overlooked something crucial. In his obsession with power, he had forgotten the fundamental nature of celestial biology, its connection to the living crystal of their world. And Nyara, as a true heir to the throne, still held that deep connection. While Thalax was focused on Arya, Nyara had been quietly communing with the crystal matrix itself, her consciousness reaching deep into its structure. The same connection that had allowed her to control the palace crystals could be used here, but at a far greater scale. Now, she shouted. Arya threw her modified medical scanner at the control crystal. At the same moment, Nyara poured her energy into the matrix, using her royal bloodline's connection to override Thalax's commands. The effect was catastrophic. The control system overloaded, sending feedback through all the modified genetics it had been controlling. Thalax screamed as his enhanced form began to destabilize, the crystals that had given him such power now turning against him. But they weren't done yet. The backlash was spreading through the entire network, threatening to kill everyone who had been modified. They had stopped Thalax, but at what cost? Arya looked at her medical readings in horror. They had only moments to prevent a massacre. Time seemed to freeze in the depths of the deep crystals as Dr. Arya Winters watched the cascade of destruction spreading through the complex's systems. Her medical scanner showed hundreds of modified celestials throughout the city beginning to destabilize, their enhanced bodies turning against them. They had stopped Thalax, but they were about to become responsible for a catastrophe. We can save them, Arya declared, her fingers flying over her medical equipment. Nyara, I need you to maintain your connection to the Matrix. Don't fight the destabilization. Guide it. The princess nodded, her face strained with concentration as she channeled her energy into the crystal networks. Around them, Thalax lay writhing, his grotesquely enhanced form crumbling as the power he had stolen turned against him. Arya worked with desperate speed, reprogramming her medical protocols to interface with the celestial technology. Her time treating Nyara had given her crucial insights into how the crystalline biology could be stabilized and healed. Now she had to apply that knowledge on a massive scale. What we did to cure your poisoning, she explained as she worked, we can do it for all of them. The poison Thalax used, it wasn't just meant to kill you. It was a prototype, a test run for controlling crystalline mutations. We can reverse engineer it into a cure. The next hours were a blur of desperate activity. As Nyara held the failing systems together through sheer force of will, Arya reprogrammed the complex's stasis chambers, turning them into emergency medical pods. Her human medical knowledge, combined with celestial crystal technology, created something entirely new. A hybrid healing system that could stabilize the modified genetics without destroying them. We can't completely reverse the modifications, Arya explained to the emergency council that had assembled in the palace above. But we can stabilize them, help the subjects adapt safely to their enhanced abilities over time instead of all at once. Throughout the city, the transformed celestials were being brought to hastily established medical centers. The rampage had ended as quickly as it began, replaced by confusion and fear as the victims of Thalax's experiments began to realize what had been done to them. In the depths of the deep crystals, Aria worked tirelessly, adapting her treatments for each unique case. Some of the modifications were more extensive than others, requiring delicate adjustments to prevent rejection. But slowly, steadily, the crisis began to stabilize. "You were right," Naira said softly, watching as another group of survivors was safely brought out of stasis. "About everything. Our isolation, our rigid adherence to tradition. It made us vulnerable. We were so convinced of our superiority that we couldn't see the corruption growing within." Aria looked up from her work, studying the princess thoughtfully. "Every civilization faces these challenges. The question is what you learn from them." Days turned into weeks as the full scope of Thalax's conspiracy was revealed. The network of secret laboratories extended far beyond the capital, reaching into every corner of the empire. The task of healing and rehabilitation would take years, but something unexpected was emerging from the crisis, a new understanding between humans and celestials. The survivors of the modifications, rather than being outcasts, became a bridge between the old ways and the new. Their unique condition required ongoing treatment that combined traditional celestial healing with human medical science, forcing both cultures to work together and learn from each other. Aria stood at the window of her newly established medical center, watching as the Crystal City slowly healed itself. The dark patches in the crystal matrix were beginning to fade, replaced by new growth that incorporated both traditional and modified celestial energies. "The Council has reached a decision," Naira announced, entering the room. She moved with the grace of full health now, her crystalline form restored to its natural beauty. "They're establishing a permanent medical exchange program between our peoples, and they want you to help lead it." Aria raised an eyebrow. "What happened to the sacred traditions?" "They're still sacred," Naira smiled. "But traditions can grow and adapt, just like crystals, just like people." She paused, looking out at the city. Thalax was right about one thing. We needed to evolve. But evolution doesn't have to mean destruction. Sometimes it means learning to see beyond our own limitations. The Stellar Mercy would remain docked at the Crystal City, transformed into a teaching hospital where human and celestial healers could learn from each other. The ship's modest medical bay had been expanded, incorporating crystal technology to create something unique in the galaxy, a place where two vastly different approaches to healing could work in harmony. "There will be resistance," Aria warned. "Change never comes easily." "No," Naira agreed, "but neither does healing. Yet you taught me that it's always worth the effort." In the years that followed, the story of the human doctor and the celestial princess became legend throughout the galaxy, not just as a tale of conspiracy and redemption, but as proof that the greatest advances come not from force or fear, but from the willingness to learn from each other. The Crystal City continued to grow and change, its spires reaching ever higher into the sky. But now they pulsed with new patterns, new harmonies that spoke of a civilization learning to balance tradition with progress, strength with compassion, isolation with connection. And in her medical center, Dr. Aria Winters continued her work, teaching and learning, healing and growing, proving that sometimes the most powerful medicine of all is the simple willingness to reach across the stars and help someone in need.